Well, welcome. I am here to tell you that in 5,000 years' time, we'll all be dead, and only brands will survive.
Time capsule
If you go Googling about time capsules, you're going to get all sorts of pictures. This is a phenomenal one, and this sort of gives you the vibe. We talk a lot about the vibe of a time capsule. This one in particular really caught me because this was a picture taken of a particular time capsule, and it sort of has the picture of a flat lay before the Instagram era. This is about 2,000 items. It is consumer goods, it is media, it is letters from children. It perfectly encapsulates one particular culture. But as I dug deeper, I realized that it's not museums or governments who have done the greatest, most prolific time capsules. It is actually consumer brands that have created the most prolific time capsules. I'm very serious about this. In fact, we'll cover a few of them here today. Westinghouse in 1938 and in 1968 created for the World's Fair in New York City, just a few miles from here in Flushing Meadow in Queens, buried two time capsules about 30 years apart. They created some of the most prolific time capsules, perfectly embodying the essence of a culture in that period of time. So for the World's Fair, Westinghouse buried items that depicted the mood and the feeling of a world that had yet to go to war. They did it in a pavilion that looked very futuristic, and you could see at the center was a monument, a plaque that signified where this particular time capsule would be buried. It's there in the center amongst those. Has anyone seen Men in Black? That's where this is buried. The story of the Westinghouse time capsule is well documented. They created a brand new alloy made out of copper and steel and aluminum, and they buried it not very deep. It's in a fairly shallow grave, if you will. It's about 50 feet below ground. The pavilion that they erected around it was there for many, many, many years. These days, you can go visit it. And they also created a ton of media to signify and inaugurate this event. Let's take a look at one of these pieces of media.
Time capsule of cupuli, deposited on the site of the New York World's Fair on September 23rd, 1938, by the Westinghouse Electric and Manufacturing Company. If anyone should come upon this capsule before the year AD 6939, let him not wantonly disturb it, for to do so would be to deprive the people of that era of the legacy here left them. Cherish it, therefore, in a safe place.
5,000 years from now, the peoples of the future will look back on us as we look back on the early Egyptians and Babylonians. The time capsule down there is actually a message from our time to theirs. Those who open and study it will know more about us than any man living today.
But Jim, how in the world do you know it'll last so long?
Because the copper tools of the ancients have come down to us from even farther back. The capsule is made of a still better copper alloy called cupuli. It's hard as steel and equal to pure copper in resistance to corrosion.
Well, what I'm wondering is how anybody will know how to find it in the year, what was it, 6939?
How to find it, what's in it. In fact, everything about it was printed in the book of record of the time capsule. It's on permanent paper and it's been distributed throughout the world. To libraries, museums, lamasseries, monasteries, temples, every safe place imaginable.
Well, who picked the stuff that was to go in it, Jim?
A committee, aided by authorities in every field of science and the arts. It's a complete record of our civilization.
A complete record of our civilization. Now, okay, well, what happens when you dig it up in 5,000 years? Or is it going to make it for 5,000 years? The greatest enemy of a time capsule isn't the weather. It's not the elements, right? Copper, you heard the Phoenicians say we have tools that lasted for 5,000 years. It's curiosity, right? We love to dig things up. So how do we prevent that? And you heard a little bit of it there. We created an entire media campaign to prevent this. So not only did we publish a book and put it in libraries around the world, you can still order this book today on the world's largest bookstore, print on demand. It can get to your house. It's called The Story of the Westinghouse Time Capsule, and it will show up to your house, print on demand in 24 hours. There's a lot of challenges with a time capsule. They created a Rosetta Stone of sorts with pictographs, a bisection of the human palate to show you where vowels are formed within the human palate. They employed a futurist and sociologist to sort of help people to recreate both the tools that show you entire histories and film of microfiche that's in the time capsule, including an entire Sears catalog from 1930s that is included in there because commerce is culture. And the list of brands that are included were highly curated by the people in the panel that put this time capsule together. In fact, many of them still exist today, RIP Kodak. A lot of these brands still endure. And why is that? When we're looking at the way that these committees came together to think about it, they thought very, very deeply about the challenges that a capsule like this would have to overcome. No capsule would be complete without merch. And so they created something called the Book of Record, and you could go and sign your name into the Book of Record that would go into the capsule. It would be hermetically sealed for 5,000 years, and then you would get this pin, which you can buy today on eBay for about $1,000. I am not saying I've bought one. I'm not saying I've not bought one. They repeated the exercise about 30 years later, and the items that went into the capsule have changed dramatically. You'll see that media plays a really big role here, a computer memory unit, a pocket radiation monitor. So the vibe changed post-war to being from one of hope and one of optimism to being one filled with fear, right? And one filled with different motives and different outlooks on society. One also of patriotism. So now we're very inwardly focused, right? So the way that we imbue our civilization and our culture also changes dramatically in how we try to depict our principles and our vision of how we see ourselves when we're creating a time capsule. I also think that this is pretty profound. When we first engaged a branding agency around future commerce, they had a specific vision of like, what Roman or Greek god embodies your brand? Has anyone ever done this for her brand? This is like a common thing. Hermes or Nike, right? They came to us and they said, you're like the Roman god Janus, right? And it's the old man looking back on all of his history and everything and all of his wisdom and knowledge that he's lived through before. And the young man looking into the future, it's the two-headed, being. And but I think that this is also sort of like a Janus moment. This is at once a tombstone of everything dead and buried, and also a birth announcement of a future that has yet to be unearthed. I think it's also interesting, for what it's worth, that we're heading into an era where reality itself is being synthesized, and pretty soon, the only things that are really true and potentially authentic are now buried 50 feet below the ground. We have pocket radiation monitors below there. We have to unearth isotope-free metals from shipwrecks to try to find things that are pre-war and pre-nuclear age. I think maybe time capsules might be the last authentic thing left. Let's talk about Panasonic real quick, or what was known as the Matsushita Electric Company at its inception. In 1970, for a World Expo at the same time, they created a time capsule. This, by far, is the most expansive and most exhaustive time capsule that I think has ever been created by mankind. For the Expo 70, they spent about 4 years in committees, put 2,500 items to record and document. A very Japanese approach and ethic to documenting the process. In fact, they created a whole book around it. Every single item was documented meticulously, from the PVC compounds and chemical and molecular structures, and documented and cross-tabulated to the provenance of many, many of the items. In fact, it's all available right now. You can go and spend hours and hours on this website, as I have. And the kinds of items are categorized by sciences, natural sciences, social sciences, and the arts. The committees chose, in particular, items that they thought would last. Right? And they didn't categorize them by brands like the Americans, right? Americans sort of chose things that they thought were durable brands and were emblematic of the American ideal. The Japanese said, no, I believe that this is a watch that is emblematic of craftsmanship. It is a 25 jewel watch that is of superlative quality, that is excellent craftsmanship, that keeps time effectively and will last for 5,000 years. hermetically sealed in this vault, in this container. They also wanted to show off medical advancements. So if you wanted a gastrointestinal advancement in gastrointestinal surgery and a scope, this is the kind of thing that was included at the time. I don't know how durable a synthetic eye will be for 5,000 years, but it's included. I like to collect certain types of things. I don't think I could collect everything in this capsule because of the volume of items that are in it, but I can collect a wristwatch. I went on a bit of a journey with AI to figure out which wristwatch this was in particular. And because they don't include what the brand is, I had to go on a little bit of a rabbit hole dive to figure out what it is. I asked ChatGPT. I pay for deep research, and it took about 30 minutes of going back and forth with it to figure it out. That is the best picture that we have of the watch. And we found the watch. It's a 1970 King Seiko 5626, and it pulled up an eBay search. I verified it because ChatGPT is now an expert jeweler, and then I bought that watch. So AI is also enabling my consumptive habits. But as you see here, a good deal of these items are consumer goods. They still, even from culture to culture, what we buy is who we become, and it is how we belong. It is still emblematic. Now, much of this was decided by committee, and many of the items here are letters written from people, as are many of the capsules. Expo 70, by the way, was the first time it came to Osaka. This year, the World Expo returns to Osaka. So if you want to go visit it, you can get there by September. It's open through September. I started to examine how I even got down this rabbit hole and started spending a ton of money on merch and started telling everybody about this. I've spent a lot of money on research on this. I call it research. It's really just collectibles. And I found that there are actually philosophical principles and psychological principles that come into play here. For instance, Robert Bornstein from Adelphi University has a really profound amount of study and research that backs this up about this idea of spreading activation of curiosity and attitude formation, and that I was exposed to this idea of time capsules once through AI, and then because of my exposure and my curiosity, I fell down the rabbit hole, and my repeated interaction is what boosted my positive feelings around it. And I believe consumers act the same way. We see this sometimes with performance marketing, where one exposure around a brand creates repeated exposure, and the repeated exposure makes people feel like they actually like it. I don't know that I actually love time capsules. I played a person on TikTok for about a month and a half while I was trying to get people to come to my webinar event that I like time capsules. Now I'm not so sure if I even like time capsules, but I have to create a lot of media about it. But Daryl Bim says that self-perception theory says that I'm a smart person, and smart people like me don't make bad choices. So in reality, I must like things that I like because I'm smart. So there's food for thought. Because consumers are smart and consumers make smart choices. We live in a paradox of consumer choice. What is the most prolific time capsule of all time? And when you look into time capsules, this is the one that comes up over and over again. It is Voyager 1 and 2 spacecraft. These are probes that were sent up in 1977. Has anyone heard of the Voyager spacecraft? So it's called the Golden Record project, was created by Carl Sagan with NASA in the late 1970s. Contrary to popular belief, Carl Sagan funded this himself. And in 1977, he created this project along with the principal artist at NASA, John Lomberg, to send a message from planet Earth out among the stars. This was the crux of a Star Trek The Next Generation episode and also a feature film. So this is sounds from Earth, and also our location in pictograph form in the solar system and in our galaxy. It also recreates a numerical system and shows that we understand things like the size of the atom and nucleus. It shows that we understand complex things like calculations of the speed of light. And it does so really beautifully on gold record, which allows it to have an incredibly long half-life. And this long half-life allows it to last for a very long time. It launched in 1977, and it left our solar system in 2012, going about 50,000 miles per hour for over 30 years. It's a long time. It also contains about 102 images of planet Earth in analog format. And so if my theory of commerce being culture is correct, there would be at least one image somewhere in there of commercial exploits somewhere in the art direction. And wouldn't you know, John Lomberg, the art director, was kind enough to do me a favor in 1977 and include at least one. There is a profound picture here, and it is of a woman in a supermarket eating a grape. Why is this so profound? And it sort of landed on me, like, this is the picture. It seems mundane at first. It was mundane to me. So I reached out and I tracked him down and I said, why this picture? And he's still alive. He lives in Kona, Hawaii. He told me, the supermarket image is one of the very few images that directly addresses the topics of commerce and economics, and intentionally so. That's why I wanted the prices so clearly visible, because we had defined numbers elsewhere. The previous two photos, elsewhere on the record, showed mechanized agriculture and a farmer eating grapes in a field. So having our model then also eat grapes in the supermarket implies that most of us don't get our grapes, or by implication anything else, directly out of fields, but they use markets instead. It's a very important human concept to convey. Coincidentally, John Lomberg's website looks like a time capsule of its own. So what of all this, right? Time capsules. I believe that we are living in a time where brands have never been more important. But I also believe, because we're at the epoch of AI, we might be heading into a time where, coincidentally, and maybe inversely, brands might never be important again, ? It's sort of a horseshoe theory moment. So we're at a tipping point. If anything, Westinghouse and Panasonic's memories will be remembered in 5,000 years. It calls into question the permanence of what we're doing. In the Westinghouse capsule, there is a letter from a very famous person, Dr. Albert Einstein, and he had this to say: "Our time is rich in inventive minds, the inventions of which could facilitate our lives considerably. We are crossing the seas by power and utilize power also in order to relieve humanity from all tiring muscular work. We have learned to fly, and we are able to send messages and news without any difficulty over the entire world through electric waves. However, the production and distribution of commodities is entirely unorganized, so that everybody must live in fear of being eliminated from the economic cycle. In this way, suffering for the want of everything. Furthermore, people living in different countries kill each other at irregular time intervals, and so also for this reason, anyone who thinks about the future must live in fear and terror." But I'll tell you what, 60-some years later, 80-some years later, maybe we don't live in so much fear and terror because of the work that we're doing. It's a little easier now to get a hold of commodities, tariffs notwithstanding. It's a little easier for us to live in not such great a fear. It's a little easier. And I think that the work that we do here every day in creating culture is the job to be done. Now, is the work that we're doing going to last till 69, 39? Probably not. But the memory of what they have done and what they have buried will remain. And why? Because I think that it is very true, and it's an inarguable fact, that what you buy is who you become. And commerce is culture. Thank you so much.